Well, let's get into our Christmas special tonight. Tomorrow, December the 25th, is a day widely anticipated and celebrated the world over to mark the birth of Jesus Christ. Well, the virtues of the celebration are simple enough: giving, sacrifice, love, humility, and grace. Now, this will be the 62nd Christmas celebration for Nigeria as a republic, so we have heard these virtues reiterated time and again. A look at the nation today shows that there's still work to be done in seeing those virtues in our day-to-day lives, both for leaders and followers alike. So, where are we getting it wrong? And joining us on this special Christmas conversation is Archbishop Alfred Adewale Martins, the Archbishop of Catholic Diocese of Lagos. Your Grace, thank you for joining us on this special edition tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Well, looking through your profile, I found something quite interesting, and I'd like to start on that note. You are ahead of Nigeria in terms of Christmases witnessed by one. So you've experienced what Nigeria as a nation has experienced from 1960, as it were. And I'd just like to ask, how is this year's celebration significant?
Well, yes, indeed. Older than Nigeria by 1 year. The Christmas this year is interesting because this is one time that we have so many challenges facing us as a nation, but also challenges facing our world as a whole. And the tendency for people is to say, all of these challenges, what is there to celebrate? However, the challenges notwithstanding, the fact is that the joy of Christmas is one that we should, as it were, ensure that we do not let it pass us by.
Leaning on the benefit of hindsight for you, having witnessed Christmas upon Christmas, what has changed over the years? And that's why I referenced just the fact that you are just ahead of Nigeria in terms of Christmases witnessed. So looking through the years, from the 70s to the 80s, 90s, up till this moment, how has the trajectory been and what has changed?
Well, growing up as a child, we had opportunities to just simply on Christmas Eve to go around visiting our relations, singing Christmas carols, just generally having a feeling of festivity around us. Generally, there were opportunities to visit Father Christmas and Father Christmas to give us gifts. There were opportunities to go to the celebrations of Mass. As for us Catholics, we go to celebration of Mass, and we just feel a general atmosphere of hope, of joy, of festivity, and all those things that mark out Christmas from every other celebration. Over the years, things have changed because we recognize the fact that these days children are not that free to just move around and sing Christmas carols from door to door. We recognize the insecurity at this time and all the challenges of ensuring that people are kept safe. So all of these are things that have changed over the years. However, as I said before, the joy of Christmas is one that is there, which we cannot miss, because it overrides. The joy of Christmas is over and above even the daily challenges that we might have, and it's over and above the daily challenges of a country or of the world as a whole.
So, as I said earlier, Your Grace, the virtues of Christmas are clear: sacrifice, grace, love, giving. And this is something we hear from time to time. I mean, across, even the religions, these are virtues you hear from time to time. But when it comes to everyday life, there seems to be that disconnect, which is why we have, as you referenced, insecurity on a large scale across the country. So why do we have this disconnect? If we keep hearing these virtues, they are there for us to see, for us to learn from. But in reality, that's not the case.
Well, it obviously means that we, who have been receiving those messages over the years, have not allowed it to find a home in our hearts, and have not allowed those messages to create the kind of behavioral attitudes that should give the joy and the peace and the love that is expected in our world. And so a Christmas that comes around like this is not just another opportunity to emphasize it again, to help people to just, as it were, recognize that the message of Christmas is the same, but each person has to ensure that he allows those messages to find a home and to make a difference in the way we live. I believe that a good bit of our problem in the world is because we are oftentimes not living up to the values and the virtues that our faith presents to us. And I think that this is the big problem, and this is the big problem that we find not only in the regular Nigerian, but also in the leadership of our country. And that is why it's necessary to continue to say it. As our people say, the only reason why you continue to repeat the same thing is so that those who hear you, one day it will find a home in their hearts and affect behavior.
So, by the virtue of your position, Your Grace, I'd like to tap into that, as it were. What is your view of Nigeria today, as it currently is?
Well, certainly Nigeria is far from where it ought to be. Nigeria, in terms of social amenities, is far from where it ought to be. In terms of the general welfare of people in this country, we are far from where we ought to be, given the kind of resources that we have as a nation, human and otherwise. I think we have not, as it were, harnessed those resources to best advantage. And so we are having to go through these difficulties, largely, I believe, because those who rule our nation, those who rule our country at all the different levels need to tap into these resources a lot more than ever before so that the life of people can be better. I believe in these days we see that there is so much poverty in the land. I mean, I sit here and people come in asking for support for this, for that, for the next one. You just recognize that the level of poverty that is here in our country is really stifling for many people. So that is one area that is of concern as far as our country is concerned at this point in time. Well, of course, looking at the security situation of our country, I think we cannot but continue to talk about that because it touches us. It touches us very closely. Wherever we may be, in any part of this country, it touches us in very serious ways. Well, of course, it touches the insecurity, it touches people, some people more, particularly in the northern part of the country. But nevertheless, the problem of kidnapping, the problem of banditry, the problem of Boko Haram, and some other issues that arise again from failure in terms of governance, but also failure in terms of providing for the welfare of people.
So we know where we are right now. I mean, you have given us an insight from your perspective. So as a nation now, with all the potentials which you referenced that, I mean, governance can tap into more, where should we be? What is our position really, ideally, as a nation with the vast resources, the people that we have and the rest? Where should Nigeria be today?
I believe Nigeria and Nigerians ought to be in a position to have education for all Nigerian children and have it in such a way that people are able to make choices of where they want to be and where they want to study. the level of education in this country, particularly in many of our public schools, have left our country in a situation that we have a lot of graduates that have not gone through the grill. Graduates at primary, graduates at secondaries, graduates at university level that do not have the kind of know-how as well as skills that are needed for living. So that's one area I think we need to reach that point at which education is available to all and everyone can leverage on the education situation in our country, can leverage on the educational situation to advance to whatever level of life he wants to be. That is as far as education is concerned. I believe that as for governance, we have to reach a point at which those who become leaders of different levels of government should have gone through a process of tutelage, should have gone through a process of learning and ensuring that they are prepared for the offices that they hold. As it were today, the processes by which those who take up positions are chosen are simply put in the hands of political parties, and political parties have their different yardsticks for choosing those that they will put into. So there ought to be, we need to get to a point at which those who lead us in this country are people who have been thoroughly prepared in a very discernible way. And I think that this is the kind of thing that should help to ensure that we are able to reach the point at which leadership gives leadership by example, and therefore all areas of our lives are taken care of because the leaders have the prerequisite experience and prerequisite skills to lead us in the right direction.
So you've spoken about education, I mean, which is said to be the bedrock of any society, and then the leadership recruitment process, and by extension, leadership at large. What about followership, really? What role, what kind of followers do we need in Nigeria? Perhaps I should use the word citizens, but I'm sure you understand what I mean.
Yes, yes. Well, certainly we, the citizens of Nigeria, we have a lot to do in ensuring that we get to where we ought to be. I mean, in the first instance, the followership, the citizens need to reach a point in awareness that we can speak out and call to order when things are not going wrong, and when things are going wrong, when they are not going well. We need to be able to have a situation in which the citizens can call our leaders to order as and when is due. But having said that, the fact of the matter is that the leadership also comes from the entire citizenry. And that, to me, means that there is a need for a complete value reorientation of values that will ensure that citizens grow up in homes and in environments that make them to be aware of the kind of values that they ought to live by and the kind of virtues that ought to guide our lives. The fact of the matter is that at this point in time, for different kinds of reasons, families have difficulties with getting the normal day-to-day thing without too much stress, and as a result, a lot of children are left without the requisite guidance and the requisite parental presence. So I think that this is part of what is responsible for the fact that the values that citizens need are simply not there. Well, are not as much as they should be available for us as citizens. And apart from that, I think that we want to go back to some of those practices that were helpful in passing values across. I mean, growing up, we had opportunities to listen to our older siblings, our older aunties, telling us stories, even stories of animals, the tortoise, the hare, the rabbit. All of those things leave something on the minds of people. And I think that we need to find some way of some storytelling, some pictures, some ways that leave values embedded in the minds of children who will eventually become the citizens and the leaders.
I mean, quite instructive there, a strong value system. And earlier on, I recalled you spoke about, people actually approaching the church, asking for assistance. And I mean, some would say even the church is performing some of the, the roles of government, as it were, even though you have not been elected, you've just been called. So by virtue of your calling, I mean, there are a lot of Nigerians who, when they look at the project Nigeria, they don't see much. I mean, and you can't blame some of them, really, because they look around them, they look at education, they look at health, infrastructure, and they say, I mean, there's nothing to write home about for them. So what do you say to those people? Because I know you have to, interface with people from time to time. What kind of message do you tell them about Nigeria?
Well, as the vocation that I have, I'm a person that is optimistic by faith, and also almost by the way that I simply am. And I think many people are like that. So naturally, when people come along and they have these challenges and difficulties, and they seem completely disillusioned, there is no other way than to give hope, and to give hope and help people to recognize the fact that we are in a situation like this. Other countries have been in situations like this. At some point in time, something happens and things turn around, and therefore we simply cannot throw our hands up and in loss of hope. Rather, we must hope and do the right things that are there. Of course, we believe in the power of prayer. There is so much more that God can do than we can ever dare to ask. And so it is important that we keep on storming the heavens, knowing full well that God does not or did not create his children to suffer. God did not create his children to go through the kind of difficulties that people go through. And therefore, if he sees us this way, things are bound to be different, because he is a loving God. I know that there are people who say at this point in time that, look, what is there to rejoice about at Christmas? What is there to be hopeful about? If God is so good, why are all of those things happening? But the fact of the matter is that God has given us things paths that we must follow. And what we can do ourselves, God will not do for us. And therefore, the kind of questions we should be asking is, what have we done with the values that our faith have given to us? What have we done with the act of love that has been brought by God, by Jesus to the world? I mean, love being the willing and wishing to the good of the other. So what have we done with that value of love? If God says we must forgive one another, and he has given that to us as ways by which we will achieve peace, by which we will achieve love, by which we will achieve joy, what have we done with forgiving one another? I mean, Nigeria as a country, and well, not Nigeria alone, but there are people who bear hatred in their hearts for one another. And sometimes you go on the internet and you see the kind of things that people say about one another, tribe to tribe, person to person, gender to gender. All of this naturally are not allowing the peace that God has established by his coming into the world in the first instance, but also by giving us the steps that we must follow in order to sustain the peace that he has brought into the world.
Well, Your Grace, we're winding down on the conversation in a couple of minutes, but I'd like you to touch on two things before we round up. First is to explore this, obligations of the citizens even further. I mean, you've talked about what have we done. You've talked about the mindset which people should have, but then actions need to follow. So, what more should Nigerian citizens be doing if we will have the Nigeria of our dreams?
First of all, I believe that we need to really have the mindset of obeying laws and rules and regulations. I think that in general, well, of course, not only Nigeria, but we all want to arrive at a situation in which we do what is right, irrespective of whether there is an enforcer of the rule or the enforcer of the law or not. That is one area that I think is important to obey and to follow the Constitution and the guidelines of that rule our nation. So that is one area that I think is very, very vital. And then, of course, we must be able to put ourselves in the shoes of others. As the scriptures have told us, love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. That involves putting oneself in the shoes of others and ensuring that what you would not want done to you, you wouldn't do it to others. And what you would wish done to you, you'd be ready to do for others. So I think these are values that are good for the entire world, but certainly we need them a lot in Nigeria as citizens.
Absolutely. So on a final note, Your Grace, please guide us. What should our Christmas celebration look like tomorrow? I know people have made plans already. They've probably bought food and the rest. But what should the ideal Christmas celebration look like in terms of perhaps what you do, the kind of people you reach out to? What should it look like?
Well, certainly the first thing is to give thanks to God for Christmas. In other words, participate in the act of worship, the Christmas celebration in the churches. That's the first thing to do. And then naturally, knowing full well that Christ has a passionate love for the poor and for the underprivileged. It is also important that people would reach out to those who are marginalized, those who are poor, those who are lonely, find some way of ensuring that we reach out to them and share with them the joy of the season. Then, of course, we shall eat our rice and drink our coke, and the children should have an opportunity to go to entertainment sports and just simply enjoy the best way possible.
Well, on this note, Your Grace, let me wish you a happy, merry, and joyful Christmas. And thank you so much, for sharing your thoughts with us on the program tonight. We've been speaking with the Archbishop of Catholic Diocese Lagos, His Grace Alfred Adewale Martins. Thank you so much.
Thank you.